The Covenant of Peaceful Worlds had existed for 3,000 cycles, a federation of 7 species bound by non-aggression and mutual trade. The Velk were philosophers, the Tharine were artists, the Sindral were scientists, all civilizations that had evolved past warfare millennia ago. Then the Krethax arrived, a warrior species from the galactic rim. The Krethax conquered through overwhelming force. They didn't negotiate. They subjugated. Within 2 cycles, 4 of the Covenant worlds had fallen. The remaining species huddled on their homeworlds, watching their allies' civilizations be dismantled. Ambassador Sela of the Velk made the desperate decision. Ancient star charts mentioned a species in a quarantined zone, labeled with warnings about their primitive violence. The Terrans. Humanity. A species the galaxy had avoided for their own protection. With her world's last long-range vessel, Sela transmitted a plea across the stars. To the humans of Terra, we are dying. We have no warriors. We need monsters. The response came within hours. Coordinates received. Help is coming. Part 2. First contact with terror. The Krethax warfleet surrounded Velk Prime, preparing for the final assault. Their commander, Warlord Threx, had never known defeat. His species had evolved as apex predators, and they ruled through fear. Then the sensors detected something impossible. A fleet emerging from quantum slip space. Not Covenant vessels, something else. The human fleet was terrifying in its efficiency. No ornate designs, no artistic flourishes. Just angular warships covered in weapons painted in colors designed for void combat. Each vessel bore the same insignia, a world wrapped in olive branches clutching arrows. Admiral Chen's voice cut across all frequencies. Krethax fleet, you have exactly 1 opportunity to withdraw. Leave these systems and never return. Threx laughed. These newcomers didn't understand power. He ordered his flagship to demonstrate Krethax superiority. The human response was instant. Kinetic rounds traveling at relativistic speeds tore through the Krethax vanguard before their shields could even activate. Point defense systems created walls of fire. Electronic warfare systems turned the Krethax's own ships against each other. In 7 minutes, a quarter of the Krethax fleet was debris. The rest retreated in disarray. The first retreat in Krethax history. Ambassador Sela watched from the surface, trembling. The humans had come, and they were everything the warnings said they'd be. Part 3. Monsters at Work. Admiral Chen established a command center on Velk Prime. The Covenant representatives gathered nervously. They had called for monsters, and monsters had answered. Now they wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. We need to understand your capabilities, Sela ventured carefully. Your strategies, our violence, Chen finished, not unkindly. You're wondering if you've traded one conqueror for another. The silence was answer enough. Chen pulled up tactical displays. Humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare. Not because we're evil, because we had to. We had no unified world, no single species. We fought each other for resources, for survival, for ideas. We learned every possible way to win. She showed them human history, the strategic brilliance of ancient generals, the technological leaps driven by conflict, the countless treaties written in blood. We learned something else too. When to stop, how to make peace, how to be better. Colonel Ramos added, the Krethax fight for dominance. We fight for those who can't. That's the difference. Over the next weeks, human forces established defensive networks around each Covenant world. They taught the local species about deterrence, about strategic thinking, but they also shared something unexpected: human culture, human art, human hope. The Covenant began to understand humans weren't monsters. They were survivors who had mastered their demons. Atfor, the Krethax response warlord. Threx couldn't accept defeat. He rallied the entire Krethax empire, 500 warships, their greatest army. This wasn't about territory anymore. It was about honor. The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1. Admiral Chen called a council of war with the Covenant leaders. They're coming with everything. This will be brutal. Should we evacuate? Sela asked. No, we stand. We show them that some lines can't be crossed. Chen looked at each ambassador. But you need to understand, war isn't clean. We're going to do terrible things to terrible people. We need you to trust that we know when to stop. The Battle of the Covenant Stars lasted 3 days. The humans used every trick learned from millennia of conflict. Gravity well traps, decoy vessels, cyber warfare. Psychological operations. They turned the Krethax's aggression against them, baiting them into kill zones. But humans also suffered. Ships were lost. Thousands died protecting worlds that weren't even their own. On the final day, Threx's flagship was disabled. Chen's Marines boarded it not to kill but to capture. The warlord faced Chen in his own command center. "Why not destroy us?" he growled. "Because we've learned that vengeance just creates more enemies," Chen replied. "You're going to stand trial. The galaxy will see that even warriors answer to justice." Part 5. The New Covenant. The war ended, but the galaxy had changed forever. The Krethax Empire dissolved, its member species freed. Some Krethax chose exile. Others stood trial and began the long process of reconciliation. Threx himself faced the Covenant's justice, and was shocked when human lawyers defended his right to a fair trial. The Covenant of Peaceful Worlds became the Covenant of Protected Worlds. Humanity took a seat at the Council, not as conquerors but as guardians. They established the Terran Defense Fleet, a volunteer force dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Ambassador Sella stood with Admiral Chen on Velk Prime, watching human and Covenant children play together in a memorial park, dedicated to all who had fallen, human and alien alike. "We called you monsters," Sella said quietly. Chen smiled sadly. "We are. Every human carries the capacity for terrible violence. But we also carry the capacity for infinite compassion. The trick is knowing which one the situation demands. And mercy? Can monsters show mercy?" Sella, "Mercy is the most human thing there is. It's easy to be kind when you're weak, it costs nothing. But to have the power to destroy and to choose not to, that's what separates civilization from barbarism." Across the galaxy, a new message spread. The Terrans had come. Not as conquerors, but as protectors. The monsters humanity feared in themselves had become the shield for those who had none. And in the darkness between stars, predator species reconsidered their plans. Because now the galaxy had something it never had before. Monsters who fought for the weak. The humans had answered the plea. And the galaxy would never be the same. The end. They pleaded for mercy, and the Terran monsters came. Part 1. The plea word count. 1-300 words. The great hall of the Covenant fell silent as Ambassador Sella stepped forward. Her blue skin looked pale under the dimming lights. Around her sat representatives from 7 peaceful species, each one showing the same expression on their different faces: fear. "The Krethax have taken another world," she announced, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "The Tharine homeworld fell 3 days ago. Our sensors detected the final transmission before their communications went dark." Elder Morven of the Syndral people stood slowly, his tall frame casting long shadows. "How many worlds does that make?" 4, Sella replied. 4 worlds and 2 cycles. 4 civilizations now under Krethax control. The chamber erupted in worried whispers. The Covenant of Peaceful Worlds had existed for 3,000 cycles. 3,000 cycles of harmony, trade, and shared knowledge. None of them had armies. None of them had weapons of war. They had evolved beyond such things, or so they believed. The Krethax had proven them wrong. "What do we know about them?" asked Representative Cole, her scales shifting colors with anxiety. Sella activated the holographic display. Images appeared showing massive creatures, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall. They had thick armor-like skin, powerful limbs, and eyes that held no mercy. "The Krethax come from the galactic rim. They are a warrior species. Everything about their culture centers on conquest and dominance. They don't negotiate. They don't accept surrender. They simply take what they want." "We must try diplomatic channels," Elder Morven insisted. "There must be something they need, something we can offer." We tried," Sella interrupted, her voice cracking slightly. "The Tharine sent diplomats. The Krethax sent back their remains in cargo containers. They included a message, and we do not talk with prey." The chamber fell silent again. The reality was settling in like a heavy weight on their shoulders. They were prey species now. Their 3,000 cycles of peace had left them defenseless. "Our defense fleet?" someone asked weakly. "We have cargo ships and exploration vessels," Sella said. "The Krethax have warships designed for one purpose: destruction. Our largest vessel has scientific equipment. Their smallest ship has weapons that could crack a moon in half. Then what can we do? Cole's voice was barely a whisper. Do we simply wait for them to arrive? Do we evacuate? Where would we even go? Sela looked around the chamber at the frightened faces. These were good people, all of them. Scientists, artists, philosophers, engineers. They had built a beautiful civilization based on knowledge and cooperation. And now that civilization was about to end. There is one option, Sela said slowly. But you won't like it. She activated another section of the holographic display. An old star chart appeared covered in warning symbols. At its center was a small yellow star with a single planet marked in red. This is a restricted zone, Elder Morven said, leaning forward. These charts are ancient. This area has been quarantined for... How long? Nearly 2,000 cycles, Sela confirmed. It's listed in the old archives as a danger zone. Ships are warned to avoid it completely. Why? What's there? Sela took a deep breath. A species called humans. Terrans. They're from a planet called Earth. I've heard stories about them, Cole said, her scales turning darker. Scary stories. They say the Terrans are violent, dangerous, that they spent their entire evolutionary history fighting and killing each other. The stories are true, Sela said. The ancient survey ships visited their system once, about 2,000 cycles ago. What they found terrified them. The humans hadn't even achieved space travel yet, but they had already developed thousands of ways to destroy each other. They had weapons that could level cities. They fought wars that killed millions. They were creative, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless when threatened. And you want to contact them? Elder Morven looked horrified. You want to bring another dangerous species into our space? The Kreethaks are already here, Sela said firmly. They've already proven they can destroy us. At least the humans. The humans might be willing to help, or they might conquer us themselves, Cole argued. Trading one enemy for another, Sela shook her head. The survey report said something else about the humans. Something important. Yes, they were violent. Yes, they fought constantly. But they also showed something unusual. They protected the weak. In their wars, they had rules about civilians. They had concepts like war crimes and crimes against humanity. They punished their own people for being too cruel. She pulled up more data from the ancient archives. The humans had a strange contradiction in their nature. They could be monsters when they needed to be, but they could also show incredible kindness. They risked their lives to save strangers. They cried over the suffering of animals. They created beautiful art even in the middle of terrible wars. That was 2,000 cycles ago, Elder Morven pointed out. Who knows what they're like now? They might have destroyed themselves. Or they might have evolved, Sela countered. They might have learned to control their violent nature. They might have become a spacefaring civilization. And if they haven't, Sela's expression hardened. Then we die anyway. At least this way, we tried everything. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for evacuation, though there was nowhere to go. Others wanted to try more diplomacy with the Kreethaks, though everyone knew it was hopeless. A few suggested they should simply accept their fate with dignity. Finally, Elder Morven called for a vote. All in favor of contacting the Terrans? Hands rose slowly around the chamber. Not everyone voted yes, but enough did. The decision was made. Sela was given command of the last long-range exploration vessel, the Star Whisper. She handpicked a small crew of volunteers, people willing to risk everything on this desperate gamble. They loaded the ship with everything they knew about the Kreethaks and set course for the restricted zone. The journey took 6 days. 6 days of wondering if they were making a terrible mistake. 6 days of hoping the humans still existed and hadn't destroyed themselves. 6 days of praying they would help instead of seeing the Covenant as just another target. When they finally reached the edge of human space, their sensors went wild. The system was full of artificial structures, stations, satellites, ships moving between planets. The humans hadn't destroyed themselves. They had thrived. Sela composed a message, choosing her words carefully. This might be the most important communication in Covenant history. To the humans of Terra, she began, her voice recorded for transmission. My name is Ambassador Sela of the Velk people. We are part of the Covenant of Peaceful Worlds. We have existed in harmony for thousands of cycles. But now we face extinction. A warrior species called the Kreethaks is destroying our civilization. We have no armies. We have no weapons. We have no way to defend ourselves. She paused, looking at her crew. They nodded encouragement. We know your reputation, Sela continued. We know you are capable of great violence. We know the galaxy has feared you and avoided you, but we also know you have protected the weak before. We know you understand the difference between strength and cruelty, so we come to you now begging for help. We need warriors. We need defenders. We need monsters who fight for the innocent. She transmitted the coordinates of the Krethax fleet positions and the Covenant worlds. Please, she finished. If you can hear this, if you still remember what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves, please help us. The message was sent into the void. 4 hours later, a response came back. It was brief in simple but clear galactic standard. Coordinates received. Fleet deploying. Help is coming. Hold on. Sela closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. The humans had answered the monsters were coming, God of Part 1. They pleaded for mercy, and the Terran monsters. Came Part 2. First contact with terror word count. 1,300 words warlord. Threx stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Bloodhammer. Through the massive viewport he could see Velk Prime, a beautiful blue and green world soon to be his. Around the planet his fleet of 200 warships waited in perfect formation. Status report, Threx commanded, his deep voice echoing through the bridge. All ships in position. Warlord, his second-in-command replied. The planet has no defenses. Their few remaining ships are scattered and helpless. We can begin the invasion whenever you command. Threx nodded slowly. The Velk were the strongest of the Covenant species, yet even they posed no real challenge. This conquest was almost disappointing. Where was the glory in defeating prey that couldn't fight back? Warlord! A sensor operator called out suddenly. We're detecting something unusual. Energy signatures appearing at the edge of the system. Another Covenant ship attempting to escape? Threx asked, barely interested. No, sir. These readings are different. Unknown ship designs. They're coming out of some kind of slip space. I count 30 vessels. No, wait, 50. No, how many? Threx demanded, turning to face the operator. The operator's face showed confusion and concern. 70 ships, sir. And they're not like anything in our databases. The energy signatures are massive. Threx strode to the sensor station and looked at the displays himself. What he saw made him pause. The ships were emerging from quantum tunnels, appearing in space with perfect precision. Their formations were tight and disciplined. These were not the scattered, panicked vessels of the Covenant species. Open a communication channel, Threx ordered. Let's see who dares to interfere with Krethax conquest. A face appeared on the main screen. A human face, though Threx didn't know that yet. The being had smooth skin, small features, and eyes that seemed almost weak compared to Krethax warriors. A female based on the analysis software. She wore a uniform covered in symbols and insignia. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet, the human said, her voice calm and steady. You are currently engaged in hostile actions against the Covenant of Peaceful Worlds. This ends now, Threx laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made his crew join in. United Earth? We have no record of such a species. Are you mercenaries hired by these weak creatures? We are defenders, Admiral Chen replied. We are here because the Covenant asked for our help. And we're giving you one chance. Withdraw your forces immediately and leave this system. Never return to Covenant space. The laughter on the Bloodhammer grew louder. One chance? These tiny beings were giving the mighty Krethax one chance? You amuse me, Admiral, Threx said, emphasizing her title mockingly. But you don't understand the situation. We are Krethax. We are the apex predators of the galaxy. We have conquered dozens of worlds. What makes you think your small fleet can stop us? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Because we're human, and humans have been dealing with bullies for 10,000 years. Last warning, Warlord. Withdraw or be removed. Threx's amusement turned to anger. These creatures dared to threaten him? Destroy them, he commanded. Show these humans what happens when you challenge the Krethax Empire. The Bloodhammer powered up its main weapons, massive plasma cannons that could burn through any known shield. 10 other Krethax warships moved forward with it, forming an attack formation. They never got the chance to fire. The human response was instant and devastating. Streams of metal projectiles appeared from nowhere, moving at impossible speeds. The Krethax shields barely flickered before the kinetic rounds tore through them, like they weren't even there. 3 warships exploded in seconds, their hulls punctured in dozens of places. Evasive maneuvers, Threx roared. Return fire! But the human ships were already moving. repositioning with incredible speed and coordination. Their weapon systems were unlike anything that Krethax had encountered. Missiles appeared, each one tracking its target with perfect accuracy. Point defense lasers created walls of light that destroyed incoming Krethax fire before it could reach them. Threx watched in growing disbelief as his vanguard was torn apart. These weren't the clumsy, desperate attacks of a weaker species. These were precise, calculated strikes from warriors who knew exactly what they were doing. Electronic warfare detected, another operator shouted. They're hacking our systems. Our targeting computers are. Several Krethax ships suddenly opened fire on each other, their weapon systems hijacked by human cyber attacks. Confusion spread through the fleet as commanders tried to figure out which ships were still under their control. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos on all Krethax frequencies. You wanted war. Warlord, this is what human war looks like. We've spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of destroying our enemies. Every weapon you see we developed fighting each other. Every tactic, every strategy, learned through blood and survival. You're not fighting merchants or artists now. You're fighting a species that climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anything that tried to kill them. A massive Krethax battlecruiser attempted to flee, turning its powerful engines to escape. Human fighters, small, fast ships piloted by single humans, swarmed it like insects. They were too quick for the battlecruiser's weapons to track. Their missiles targeted the engine specifically, crippling the ship and leaving it floating dead in space. Enough, Threx bellowed. Full fleet assault. All ships attack formation Gamma. We'll overwhelm them with numbers. The remaining Krethax fleet surged forward, nearly 150 ships moving as one. Surely the humans couldn't stand against such force, but the humans didn't retreat. Instead, they did something unexpected. They split their fleet into smaller groups, each one moving independently. The Krethax formation, designed to concentrate firepower, suddenly had no single target. The human groups weaved through the Krethax ships, attacking from multiple angles, creating chaos and confusion. Threx realized with growing horror that the humans were using the Krethax's own size against them. The larger Krethax ships couldn't maneuver quickly enough. They were hitting each other in the confusion, their concentrated formation becoming a weakness instead of a strength. They're hurting us, Threx's second-in-command said in disbelief. They're treating us like animals. It was true. The humans were directing the battle, pushing the Krethax fleet exactly where they wanted it. And then Threx saw why. They'd been pushed into range of massive human weapons platforms that had been quietly positioning themselves throughout the battle. The platforms opened fire. These weren't precision strikes. These were area weapons designed to destroy everything in a specific zone. Massive explosions ripped through the clustered Krethax formation. In 12 minutes, a quarter of the Krethax fleet was destroyed or disabled. 12 minutes. Threx had never experienced anything like it. Warlord, we must retreat, his second-in-command urged. We're being slaughtered. The word hung in the air. Slaughtered. The Krethax, the mighty conquerors, were being slaughtered like prey animals. All ships, Threx said, his voice barely controlled. Retreat. Full speed. Now. The remaining Krethax fleet turned and fled, their powerful engines pushing them away from the human fleet as fast as possible. It was the first retreat in Krethax history. As they ran, Admiral Chen's voice followed them. Tell every warrior species in the galaxy what happened here today. Tell them that the Covenant has defenders now. Tell them that humanity has entered the galactic stage. And tell them that we protect those who cannot protect themselves. The next time you attack peaceful species, we'll be there. And next time we won't let you retreat. On the surface of Velk Prime, Ambassador Sella watched the battle through her ship's sensors. Her hands trembled as she saw the Krethax fleet, the unstoppable force that had destroyed 4 worlds, running away in panic. What have we done? Whispered one of her crew members. What kind of monsters did we invite into our space? Sella didn't answer immediately. She watched as the human fleet established defensive positions around Velk Prime, their ships moving with perfect discipline. On her screen, she could see Admiral Chen giving orders, coordinating her forces, ensuring not a single human ship pursued the fleeing Krethax beyond the system's edge. Maybe, Sella said quietly, we invited exactly the kind of monsters we needed. End of part 2. They pleaded for mercy, and the Terran monsters came part 3. Understanding the monsters' word count. Quite clear 300 words. The conference room on Velk Prime was filled with nervous energy. Ambassador Sella sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by representatives from the 3 remaining Covenant worlds. Across from them sat Admiral Sarah Chen and several other human officers. The humans looked calm and professional in their dark blue uniforms, but the Covenant representatives couldn't stop thinking about what they had witnessed in space. These peaceful-looking beings had destroyed a quarter of the Krithax fleet in minutes. Thank you for meeting with us, Sella began, choosing her words carefully. We are grateful for your intervention. You saved our world. Admiral Chen nodded. That's why we're here, Ambassador. Your message was clear. You needed help and we answered. Yes, but now we need to understand something, Elder Morvan said, his voice shaking slightly. We called for monsters to fight monsters. We got exactly what we asked for. But now those monsters are in our space, sitting in orbit around our planets. How do we know we haven't simply traded one conqueror for another? The room fell silent. It was the question everyone was thinking but afraid to ask. Admiral Chen didn't look offended. Instead, she smiled sadly. That's a fair question, Elder. And honestly, it's a smart question. You should be asking it. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Velk architecture was beautiful. Tall spires of crystal and metal that caught the sunlight. Nothing like the angular, practical buildings of Earth. Let me tell you about humanity, Chen said. About 10,000 years ago, humans lived in small groups scattered across our planet. We weren't the strongest species. We weren't the fastest. We didn't have claws or armor or venom. But we had something else. We had big brains and we could work together. She turned back to face the Covenant representatives. We also had one big problem. We were alone. There were no other intelligent species on Earth. So when we needed resources, when we competed for territory, when we disagreed about ideas, we fought each other. Colonel Marcus Ramos, sitting next to Chen, pulled up a holographic display. Images appeared showing human history. Ancient warriors with primitive weapons, medieval armies, modern soldiers. We got very, very good at war, Ramos continued. Every generation developed new ways to fight. New weapons. New tactics. New strategies. We studied war like you study science. We wrote books about it. We taught it in schools. We made it an art form. That's what frightens us, Cole said, her scales shifting to a pale color. You perfected violence. Yes, Chen agreed. But we learned something else too. Something just as important. She changed the display. Now it showed different images. Humans helping each other. Medical workers treating the injured, soldiers protecting civilians. Peace treaties being signed. We learned when to stop, Chen said. We learned that endless war destroys everyone. We learned that protecting the weak makes us stronger as a species. We learned that mercy isn't weakness, it's the ultimate form of strength. How? Sella asked. How did you learn that? Ramos spoke up. Through pain, Ambassador. Through making every possible mistake. There were times in our history when we were truly monstrous. We committed terrible acts against each other. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came very close to wiping ourselves out. What stopped you? Elder Morvan leaned forward, genuinely curious. We did, Chen said simply. Humans stopped humans. There were always people who said, this is wrong, and fought against the cruelty. Scientists who refused to build certain weapons. Soldiers who protected enemies who surrendered. Leaders who chose peace over glory. Artists who showed the horror of war and made people want to stop. She sat back down at the table. We had countless wars, but we also had countless peace treaties. We had weapons of mass destruction, but we also had rules about how to fight fairly. We had conquerors, but we also had defenders. And slowly, painfully, we learned to be better. And now? Cole asked. What is humanity now? Now we're a united species, Chen answered. It took us until about 300 years ago, but we finally managed it. We put aside our differences and built a single government for Earth. We still argue, still disagree, still have conflicts. But we solve them with words now, not weapons. Then why do you still have such a powerful military? Elder Morvan asked, gesturing toward the window where human warships could be seen in orbit. Because the universe is a dangerous place, Ramos said. We hoped we'd find peaceful neighbors when we reached for the stars. And we did, we found you. But we also found species like the Krethax. We found pirates and raiders and conquerors. We learned that someone needs to stand between the peaceful and the predators. Chen added, We became the monsters who hunt monsters. We keep our weapons sharp and our skills ready, not because we want to use them, but because we might need to. And when we do use them, we use them to protect, not to conquer. Sela looked at the human admiral carefully. How can we trust that? How do we know you won't change your minds? Power corrupts, Admiral. We've seen it happen even in our own peaceful species. You're right to worry, Chen acknowledged. Power does corrupt. That's why we have checks and balances. Our military answers to civilian leadership. We have laws about what we can and cannot do. We have courts that try soldiers who commit crimes, even in war. We have journalists and citizens who question everything we do. She pulled out a small device and projected another image. The Earth, blue and green and beautiful. More importantly, we remember where we came from. Every human child learns about the mistakes of our past. We teach them about the wars, the suffering, the times we were monsters to each other. We make sure they understand the cost of violence. We never want to forget what we're capable of, because forgetting would make it easier to do those things again. The Krethax don't seem to have learned that lesson, Sela observed. No, Ramos agreed. They evolved differently. They had no competitors on their world. They became apex predators with no natural enemies. They never needed to develop empathy or cooperation beyond their own species. To them, everyone else is just prey. Can they be taught? Elder Morven asked. Can they learn to be better? Chen considered this. Maybe. Humanity learned through suffering and choice. The Krethax will need to make that same choice. But first, they need to understand they're not invincible. That's what we showed them today. What happens next? Cole asked. Will the Krethax return? Probably, Chen said. But not right away. They need to regroup, rethink their strategy. That gives us time to prepare. We'll help you build defenses, not weapons to attack with. Defensive systems to protect your worlds. We'll teach you about strategic thinking, about deterrence, about making yourselves too difficult to be worth attacking. You'll stay? Sela felt a wave of relief. We'll stay as long as you need us, Chen confirmed. We'll establish a permanent presence in Covenant space. Not as rulers, as partners. As friends if you'll have us, Ramos smiled. Besides, we're curious about your cultures. You have 3,000 years of uninterrupted peace and development. Imagine what we can learn from each other. You can teach us about your art, your philosophy, your sciences. We can teach you about, well, hopefully nothing too violent. The tension in the room began to ease. The Covenant representatives were starting to understand. The humans were powerful, yes. They were dangerous, absolutely. But they were also principled. They had rules. They had limits. They had learned from their mistakes. There's one more thing you should know, Chen said seriously. We're not perfect. We'll make mistakes. We might misjudge situations or make decisions you disagree with. When that happens, tell us. Challenge us. Keep us honest. We need that just as much as you need our protection. Sela stood and extended her hand, a human gesture she had learned. Chen took it and they shook. Then we have an agreement, Sela said. The Covenant welcomes humanity as our defenders and our friends. We called for monsters and monsters came. But perhaps you're the right kind of monsters, Chen smiled. We prefer to think of ourselves as humans who know when to be monsters. There's a difference. Outside the window, human ships patrolled the skies while Velk citizens went about their lives below. For the first time in weeks, they felt safe. The monsters were watching over them. End of part 3. They pleaded for mercy. And the Terran monsters came part 4. The Krethax return word count. 1,300 words. 6 weeks had passed since the first battle. Warlord Threx sat in the War Council chamber on the Krethax homeworld, surrounded by the Empire's greatest military leaders. The shame of their retreat still burned in every warrior's heart. The humans must be destroyed, declared Commander Vask, slamming his fist on the table. They humiliated us. They made us run like frightened prey. Every species in the galaxy will have heard about our defeat. And they will think the Krethax are weak, added General Crane. Our reputation built over centuries was damaged in 12 minutes by these Terrans. Threx listened to his commanders argue and plan. They wanted revenge. They wanted to restore Krethax honor. They wanted to prove that their first defeat was just a fluke, a moment of surprise against an unknown enemy. We have gathered 500 warships, Threx announced, his voice cutting through the debate. Every available vessel in the Empire. This time we won't underestimate the humans. This time we bring everything. The War Council cheered. 500 ships, 10 times what they had lost. Surely the humans couldn't stand against such overwhelming force. We attack in 3 days, Threx continued. We'll hit them with such power that they'll have no choice but to retreat. And then we'll take the Covenant worlds as planned. The humans will learn that the Krethax Empire cannot be defeated. Meanwhile, on Velk Prime, Admiral Chen stood in the newly established Human Command Center. Around her, holographic displays showed the defensive network they had built around each Covenant world. Human and Covenant officers worked side by side, monitoring space traffic and coordinating patrols. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. "We're picking up massive energy signatures at the edge of Krethax space. Multiple slip space openings. It looks like, Admiral, I count over 400 ships. Maybe 500? Chen felt her stomach tighten. She had expected the Krethax to return, but not with their entire fleet. "Sound general alert. Get all ships to battle stations. Contact every Covenant world and tell them to activate emergency protocols." Within minutes, the command center was buzzing with activity. Chen pulled up a secure channel to Earth Command. "This is Admiral Chen. The Krethax are returning with their full military might. We're outnumbered almost 7 to 1. Requesting immediate reinforcements." The response came quickly. "Reinforcements are minimum 2 weeks away, Admiral. You'll need to hold them off until then. Earth has faith in you. Do what you do best. Protect those who can't protect themselves." Chen closed the channel and looked at her tactical officers. "All right, people. We knew this was coming. Time to show them that humans don't just fight hard. We fight smart." She activated the command network that connected all human ships. "This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. The Krethax are coming with everything they have. They want revenge. They want to prove they're still the strongest. Our job is to prove them wrong." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But listen carefully, this isn't just about winning a battle. Every action we take today will be watched by the entire Covenant. They need to see that we're not like the Krethax. We fight to protect, not to destroy. We use force because we must, not because we want to. Show them what humanity really means." Ambassador Sella watched the preparations from the surface of Velk Prime. Around her, Covenant citizens were being evacuated to underground shelters, a precaution the humans had insisted on building. "They're really coming back," Elder Morvan said, his voice filled with worry. 500 ships, Sella. The humans only have 70. "I know," Sella replied, watching human fighters launch from the orbital stations. "But I've learned something about humans these past weeks. They don't measure strength in numbers alone." Colonel Ramos approached them, his expression serious but calm. "Ambassadors, the Admiral wants you in the command bunker. It's going to get dangerous up here soon. Will you win?" Sella asked directly. Ramos considered the question. "Honestly, the odds aren't good. We're heavily outnumbered, but humans have overcome bad odds before. It's kind of our specialty. The Battle of Covenant. Stars began 3 hours later. The Krethax fleet emerged from slip space. In a massive formation, a wall of warships stretching across space like a metal moon. Their strategy was simple: overwhelming firepower. They would crush the human fleet through sheer numbers. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiant, watching the Krethax approach. "Status report. All ships ready, Admiral. Defensive platforms online. Covenant evacuation complete." "Good." Chen studied the tactical display. The Krethax were coming straight at them, confident in their superior numbers. They expected a direct battle, ship against ship. They weren't going to get one. "Execute Protocol Thermopylae," Chen ordered. The human fleet suddenly split apart, ships moving in different directions. Instead of facing the Krethax wall, they scattered like leaves in the wind. The Krethax, expecting a head-on clash, found themselves with no single target. "What are they doing?" Threx demanded from his flagship. "Are they running?" "No, Warlord," his sensor operator replied. They're spreading out. Each group is taking position near different Covenant worlds." Threx saw the human strategy immediately. They weren't trying to fight the entire Krethax fleet at once. They were forcing the Krethax to split up too. If the Krethax wanted to attack the Covenant worlds, they would have to divide their forces. "It's a trap," Threx growled. "They want us to separate so they can fight smaller groups." "Then what do we do?" asked his second-in-command. Threx made his decision. "We split our fleet. Send 100 ships to each major Covenant world. The humans can't defend everywhere at once. We'll overwhelm them through multiple attacks. The Krethax fleet divided into 5 massive groups, each one heading toward a different target. It seemed logical. Even 100 ships should be enough to defeat the small human forces at each world. But Admiral Chen had planned for this. As the Krethax groups moved toward their targets, they entered areas of space that the humans had carefully prepared. Automated weapons platforms hidden among asteroids and space debris suddenly activated. Minefields that had been invisible to sensors exploded. Satellites began jamming Krethax communications. At Velk Prime, the Krethax force found themselves facing not just human ships, but a carefully prepared killing ground. The humans used the planet's gravity well to their advantage, forcing the Krethax into predictable trajectories. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and then retreating before the Krethax could respond effectively. "They're not fighting like warriors," a Krethax commander complained. "They're using tricks. Deception. They're using their brains," Threx replied bitterly, watching the battle unfold. The humans were fighting the way humans had always fought, smart, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. At the Syndral homeworld, human fighters lured Krethax ships into a debris field from an old space station. The Krethax, with their larger ships, had trouble maneuvering. The nimble human fighters took them apart piece by piece. At the Therine world, human cyber warfare specialists hacked into Krethax targeting systems, causing chaos and friendly fire incidents. Hours passed. The battle raged across 5 different star systems. The Krethax had numbers, but the humans had preparation, strategy, and something else, desperation. They were protecting innocent lives, and that gave them a strength the Krethax couldn't match. Threx watched his forces slowly being worn down. For every human ship destroyed, they were losing 3 or 4 Krethax vessels. The mathematics were clear. If this continued, he would lose his entire fleet. "Warlord," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost nearly 200 ships. Our forces are exhausted. Ammunition is running low, and, Warlord, the humans have barely used half their resources. They're fighting efficiently, conserving their strength." Threx felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. Not fear of death, but fear of complete defeat. Fear that the Krethax Empire was facing something it couldn't conquer. "New contacts," the sensor operator shouted. "Multiple slip-space signatures. More human ships are arriving." Earth's reinforcements had arrived early. Threx watched as fresh human vessels emerged from quantum tunnels. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers. The humans hadn't been fighting alone. They had been buying time, wearing down the Krethax until help could arrive. "It's over," Threx said quietly. He had lost. Not through cowardice or weakness, but through facing an enemy that was simply better at war than the Krethax could ever be. "Signal all forces," Threx ordered, his voice heavy. We surrender." The words felt like poison in his mouth. The Krethax had never surrendered before. But Threx knew that continuing would mean the destruction of his entire fleet, and the end of the Krethax Empire itself. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his screen. "Warlord Threx, I acknowledge your surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You and your commanders will stand trial for your crimes against the Covenant species." "Trial?" Threx looked confused. "You're not going to destroy us?" Chen's expression was stern but not cruel. "We're not monsters, Warlord. We fight to protect, not to annihilate. You'll face justice, but you'll face it fairly. That's the difference between us."